Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Think Before You Hate podcast. I'm Alex with the Chicago Commission on Human Relations, and we're the city's civil rights agency. What we do is we fight discrimination and prejudice here in the city of Chicago by enforcing the Chicago Human Rights Ordinance as well as the Chicago Fair Housing Ordinance. And today we have another special guest. We have Sandi Byrd, who is the Executive Director of the Chicago Community Justice Foundation. Sandi, thank you very much for hopping on the podcast with us today. And will you please tell us a little bit about yourself and where'd you grow up?
Thank you for having me first. I grew up in Reno, Nevada, born and raised in Reno, and I am a Midwest transplant, but have been here for a very long time.
Same here.
I went to law school, undergrad and law school at Indiana, so, we have a good national championship football team right now. Mm-hmm. Moved to the Chicago area after law school. I was in the suburbs for a while, and then moved into the city many years ago and have been a very proud Chicagoan since.
Nice. I'm a transplant myself. I'm originally from Connecticut, and I love living out here. I always like to make comparisons between New York and Chicago because I grew up right outside of New York. But like both cities, but I really love living here in Chicago myself. So
I would say those comparisons land on Chicago being better, right?
Yes, I do. Okay. You're the Executive Director of the Chicago Community Justice Foundation. What does your role entail, and what does your organization do?
So Chicago Community Justice Foundation is a newer organization. We started in the spring of 2023, so we're just coming in to the close of our third year. And it's been a really fun but a little bit of a wild ride. I'm learning a lot. As executive director, I do all of the things that it takes to run a business, and in this case, a nonprofit. So I don't do all of it, but I'm involved with the fundraising, the budgeting, the marketing, the community engagement. I do the front-facing things. I do the back office things, so a little bit of everything. But I'm also a lawyer, and we provide legal services. So I'm also acting in the role of a lawyer and representing clients in court, representing them in administrative hearings, helping to educate the community. We do a lot of educational seminars with other organizations and at public events. So doing all of that. The other thing we're doing is when we started, we purchased a building in Humboldt Park, in West Humboldt Park. So it's almost to Pulaski on North Avenue, and we're renovating that building. So I am learning how to do commercial renovation as well.
Nice. You're a jack of all trades, master of all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
For our listeners who aren't familiar, how do you define community justice, and how is it different from traditional criminal legal reform?
I think that has probably two answers, because I think I have two roles.
You can have as many answers as you want.
Certainly have at least two roles within the organization. And in my role as executive director, I can think of that term, I think, more broadly than I do in my role as a lawyer, because as the executive director, I am interacting with the community on a different level. I am assessing things differently than I am as a lawyer. And so I am looking at things like the building that we're renovating, which is going to be a community resource. It's going to be a place where people can come. We're going to co-locate with multiple different nonprofits that offer different kinds of services. And so people from the community are going to be able to come there and engage in services under one roof, where they don't have to try and go between different buildings, different locations, where transportation can become an issue, time can become an issue, all of the things that kind of lead to failure in the social service realm. We're going to try and eliminate those kinds of barriers. As a lawyer, my first focus of community justice is on my client, right? My particular client, and addressing whatever the legal issue is that client needs addressed at that time. And once we either have that resolved or under some level of control, then it would look a little more holistically. Like, what other things do we need to consider? What other things need to be in place? What other suggestions can I make to this client that might help the work that we've done continue and be successful, and help them within their community, within their family, within their home, to be successful and move forward?
Okay, perfect. Now, the Chicago Community Justice Foundation, it's my understanding that it's rooted on the west side of Chicago. What legal services are most in demand in this community right now, and what do those needs tell us about the deeper structural challenges residents are facing currently?
The right now has changed since we started a very short 3 years ago. 3 years ago when we started, we were really focusing on what were barriers people were facing. What were the things that were stopping them from being fully employed or having safe, stable housing or being able to get their kids to school safely. What kinds of barriers could we help remove from their lives that would make them be able to live fuller, richer, more stable lives? And that has been a lot of work with criminal record relief, so expungement and sealing, with driver's license reinstatement issues, so people who have not previously been able to drive lawfully, but maybe they're doing it anyway because they don't feel like they have other options, helping them get those driving privileges back. We've worked with a lot of people in domestic violence situations, helping with orders of protection or getting them into safe and stable housing somewhere away from the situation that they're currently in. A little bit of work with divorces, a little bit of work with orders of protection, child custody issues, all of those kinds of issues that are facing people and stopping them from being safe and stable in their communities.
Okay.
Obviously, the political climate has changed a little since we started.
Just a little.
Just a little since we started 3 years ago. And there's a huge need for immigration services now,
Right.
which is not something we offer today, but which is something we would love to grow into. With that change in the political climate is also a change in the funding climate. And so working on getting funding to be able to hire someone who has that experience and can help to offer those services to the community because they're in great need, particularly on the west side of the city.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. Now, amid the challenges your organization encounters, what are some success stories among Chicago Community Justice Foundation? Is there a specific moment in which you're most proud of?
I don't know that I can put my finger on one moment, but the look on people's faces when they get their criminal record expunged or sealed is kind of priceless. It feels like it might be a little thing to those of us who don't live under that stress, I think.
Sure.
But when people realize that they no longer have to report that information to an employer, or I've had people who all they want to do is be able to volunteer at their kids' school or coach their kids' baseball team, or something that seems so small and just so automatic that people are either afraid to even try because they don't want the stigma or the embarrassment of having a background check come back and show that they had a, bar fight when they were 18 years old and had a felony conviction. So just that sense of relief that you see in people's eyes when that process is completed is, I think, a great success story. I also had an individual who had never had a valid driver's license but was driving because felt they needed to drive to do what they needed to do with their family, their kids, to have their job, and we were able to get that person a driver's license for the first time by going back and helping them navigate the system and helping them figure out all the steps they needed to go through to do what needed to be done to get a valid driver's license. And the first time that they drove up with this grin on their face without the fear of getting arrested as they were driving their kid to school or driving to work. Those little things are really, really rewarding.
Yeah, and that must be liberating for those individuals. Yeah. Can you tell us about your legal trajectory? Like, how did you get to where you are now as executive director? And I'm asking for those younger listeners who feel that social justice is their true calling.
A very non-traditional path.
Okay.
Straight out of law school, I was a public defender in Chicago suburbs. And I did public defender work for about 6 or 7 years before I left and went out on my own and opened up my own legal practice where I focused primarily on criminal defense work. And even in that practice, though, I also had a contract to do conflict public defender work with the county. So when the public defender's office couldn't represent someone because of a conflict of interest, that case would get sent to me. So I still had my fingers in the public defender world while I had a private practice. And I initially did that solo by myself, and then one of my former colleagues from the public defender's office, we joined forces and opened a firm together. And I did that for total 15 or 16 years, I think.
Okay.
And then hit a point where I burnt out a little bit on, I think, some frustrations with what I saw as pretty true injustices within the system. So I left and I went and did some civil litigation work for 6 or 7 years. And then from that back into this world that I'm in now, where I'm the executive director of the Chicago Community Justice Foundation.
Yeah, well, perfect. Here's one question I ask all of our listeners. In your opinion, or all of our listeners, all of our guests, in your opinion, what can our listeners do in their everyday lives to combat hate and discrimination?
You're saying hopefully the listeners ask themselves that question,
Yes.
if you're not asking. I think that one of the most important things people can do is they can get to know their neighbors. They can get to know the other people in their community. And if you look around and everyone in your immediate area looks or sounds or talks just like you, we live in a big, beautiful, diverse city. Go to another neighborhood and go to their restaurants and go to their shops and talk to the people who live and work there and get to know people. It's so much more difficult to hate or discriminate against people that you know.
Right.
And so if you don't know them, make it your job to get to know people who are different than you. I also it was earlier this week, I heard one of our local newscasters get interviewed by her own news station. She was apparently attacked while she was in the middle of reporting a story, and was within the last, couple of months, it sounded like. And the attacker was trying to pull her out of her car by grabbing her jaw, and in doing so, dislocated both sides of her jaw and removed her tongue, the connection on her tongue.
Whoa.
And when she was asked by her colleague, when she was being interviewed, her thoughts about what happened, she said, what we need to do is understand each other. And we need to look and see where people are falling through the cracks and where we're failing our neighbors. So it was very striking to me in a moment where I thought she could really just say, this person is horrible and evil and needs to be locked up forever. Her response to that was, let's see what we can fix. Let's look at ourselves and see what we can fix. And I thought that was a pretty powerful statement of how not to hate and how not to discriminate. And I think if we would all do a little bit more of that, it would lead us to a much nicer place.
Well, as Bad Bunny said during the Super Bowl, the only thing more powerful than hate is love.
Exactly.
I believe that's what he said. I'm not sure if that's verbatim what he said, but I feel like when he said that, it was his own loose quote off of what Martin Luther King said. So yeah, that definitely makes sense, and I agree. Now, is there anything that you wanted to mention that we didn't bring up today?
Not that I can think of right now.
Well, perfect. If there's any of our listeners that want to follow the Chicago Community Justice Foundation on social media or contact your organization, how could they do so?
As I told you before we started, I'm terrible at social media. So the social media part is still a work in progress. We do have a website. It's CHI-justice, JUSTICE.org. We can be reached through that website. There's a contact us page. There's some information on the programs that we offer. There's information on the building that we're renovating. Anyone who has any questions or wants to reach out or wants more information, that would be the best way to do it.
Perfect. Well, Sandi, thank you very much for joining our podcast today. And I've learned a lot about the Chicago Community Justice Foundation. And thank you very much for letting us and our listeners know about your organization and what you do for the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our listeners for joining us for another episode of the Think Before You Hate podcast. Remember, if you or anybody you know feels that they've been a victim of discrimination here in the city of Chicago, please do not hesitate to contact the Chicago Commission on Human Relations at 312-744-4111. Again, that is 312-744-4111. Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we're on X, we're on Instagram, and most recently Blue Sky. And remember, until next time, think before you hate.